Hey, now it's Brace for Impact, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm going solo one that ass, but it's still the same. We're talking TNA wrestling, and man, we got a lot of cool things to talk about. I'm excited to talk about TNA because I have done most of my podcasting this week talking about fucking WWE and the shit show that company is, and the atrocities that have been happening in that company for the last 40 years. And we have this company, TNA, a small company that's on a small network that is, primed to have their biggest year in a decade. Under this, Scott Demore led company, they're looking great. I am a little bit worried about their Orlando tapings, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you know, we have a lot of cool stuff to talk about with TNA, and we don't have any of the drama. And it's been a long time, and I'm trying to think back when the last time we had any type of drama surrounding this company. The only times that I even speak negatively on the company is usually around like booking decisions and poor production and things like that, and bad some not even bad business decisions, but business decisions that just don't make any sense to me. And but we don't really get like this awful drama that we've had in WWE, like, which, like, this week has been the worst I've ever, like, since I've been a podcaster. That was probably the toughest podcast I've ever done because of the subject matter. But the awful atrocities that happened with Vince McMahon, and then of course the just crazy drama that has gone on in AEW with the whole Punk situation, and back and forth. But that Punk stuff, that was, like, honestly, like, that was fun for me to cover. Like, that was, like, I like stuff like that. I like chaos. What happened in WWE this week? I don't want anything to do with that. I can't make any jokes out of that. Like, that's just not a funny situation. Well, let me say, I can. But I'm not going to, because I just find it to be inappropriate, especially going on air, because you never know who's listening and how they might take it. And some people are like me that have kind of a darker sense of humor, but like my sense of humor is pretty damn dark. But I'm not even touching this stuff because that's not even good for me. You know what I mean? So I am just super excited to to talk about TNA Impact. I see we got a couple of people watching live here on Patreon, so thank you guys for being Patreon subscribers. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you're watching it for free, which this does get released eventually onto YouTube, probably like Monday mornings. Typically, this is Saturday morning. I'm recording this. And for Patreon subscribers, we're doing it live. You guys can chime in the chat. You can drop me a line however you want. You get and then you get it for a couple of days before anybody else. So I really do appreciate your Patreon subscribers. But if you're not, please think about joining us. I crank out content all throughout the week. Me and JD always got a bunch of stuff going on. So patreon.com/the Mike and JD show. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, please give me a big thumbs up and drop a comment. Also, I really appreciate that. But Patreon, man, thank you guys for being here. And so where we're going to start off this week, I think the biggest news of the week is Mustafa Ali. He, that was a guy, of all of the WWE fireds, I found him to be the most interesting, because he was one of those guys. He's a young guy that can really work, and he has some charisma, but he was one of those guys that WWE never got behind. And the audience were trying to tell them, hey, you can get behind this guy. He did a good job of working his social media to always get people on his side and making it seem like he was a victim of WWE, a victim of bad booking, a victim of circumstance, of like, he was just constantly galvanizing people to get WWE to, like, book him better. And they just never did. And he actually ended up asking for his release several times. They never gave it to him. And then eventually, when it became their decision, they went ahead and released the guy. And so I was interested in him, but I just assumed, because of that, because of the fact that he had a lot of people on social media having his back, and saying that he was being persecuted by WWE, that I figured that AEW would pick him up. And then whenever he got his his, like, I think December 21st is when everybody, got out from their 90-day clauses. He had already had a bunch of dates lined up. So it was like, okay, well, AEW is clearly not picking this guy up. And then he had already booked some dates that were in that lined up on the same day as Impact. So I was like, okay, well, Impact's probably not getting this guy either. And so I was like, okay, well, if AEW doesn't pick him up, I get the feeling that eventually TNA will get some dates on him. It does not appear like this guy's looking for a long-term contract. He wants to do the Matt Cardona route, which Matt Cardona is like the current template. And he wants to just go work everywhere. He wants to be his own boss, and I can honestly respect that. So, but at the end of TNA this week, a post-credit scene, they kick to a Muhammad. Sorry, it's so funny is I'm usually wearing a Muhammad Ali T-shirt or something, Muhammad Ali gear whenever I'm doing these Impact shows on the weekend, because I have like a zip-up hoodie, but it's dirty because I worked out in it, so I just picked up my 49er hoodie that was just like on my dresser over here. So, but Mustafa Ali. They kicked to one of his like campaign vignettes that he recorded that he released on Twitter the day he got released, and it looks like he's coming in. And then he posted his schedule, and he's locked in starting on No Surrender to every Impact date through the end of March. So February and March, he's all locked in. He did not announce any dates for April, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's going to be in for Rebellion and the subsequent dates, and he's probably going to be a regular going forward. No announcement has been made. No, nothing like that, other than he's coming in. So he did not get the same graphic that one Dana Brooke got, or Ash by Elegance, and Zaya Brookside, and all these Trent Seven and Kushida, where it said he has signed. He hasn't gotten that. So it looks like him and Nick Nemeth, at least at this point, until there's an announcement being made, we can assume that they're going to be freelancers going forward. But I think that's cool. I wish that they would, Impact would, or TNA would get these guys under like a deal that allows them to continue to work indies, which is kind of what a lot of their people already have. And get them locked in for a couple of years, but it doesn't appear like they want that. And so they might not, TNA might not have the resources to get them to sign that kind of deal. So right now they're just getting them on their independent rate. So, which is fine for TNA, they don't work that many dates. And there's a lot of times there's, big gaps between when they're actually doing their events. So, I think they're not really doing anything until the end of February for No Surrender. I think like the 20th or something like that. I can't remember, but yeah. Mustafa Ali. He was a really good talent in WWE that never really got his due. Some people might say he's a bit overrated. I don't know. I thought he was really good in the ring. And he's got some charisma. I don't know that he can cut a great promo, like a money drawing promo, but he can cut a good promo, and he can have good matches. But I'll be honest, I have not seen him have like any significant ring time since his Buddy Murphy feud on 205 Live. And that was one of those things like I only ever watched 205 Live when they were wrestling each other. I had no interest in that show. And then but they were having these awesome matches, so I went ahead and checked it out. And they were awesome. So like I know he's capable of having really good matches. Honestly, he might have actually made a bigger imprint in WWE had he not complained a lot on social media. But because he complained a lot on social media, he's got a lot of people on his side, and now he's getting to do this world tour, and he's got a lot of people, having his back, and members of the media having his back. And those are the types of people that TNA is going to go for. Right. I'll tell you, there's another guy that's like top dollar, AJ Francis. He gets a lot of people on his side, especially in the media, because he gives them access, and they go around telling you that he's the greatest in the world, and they're interviewing him, and he's on all their websites, and he gets people on his side, and of course that's TNA brought him in. So I think that they love people like that. They love people that are social media influencers. and they brought in 2 so far with Ali and now AJ Francis as well. And so the other big news, I thought this was so last week I had talked about. Oh, hold on. Oh, wow, damn. So last week I had talked about the hard to kill pay per view buys because Meltzer had reported it in the previous week that it was a 3,120, which would get them into the mid to high teens as far as pay per view buys total. So and we talked about how television pay per view buys makes up about 30% of the total. So this week, and I'll just read what he wrote. He said, "Hard to Kill by TNA standards," and I think that's important. Like I said, and I went on this whole diatribe last week. I'm not going to do it, but you can't compare TNA standards to AEW standards when we're talking about pay-per-view buys. They're in different leagues. Okay, so Hard to Kill by TNA standards looks to be a huge success on pay-per-view. The number after 12 days out from the show were 8,000. So television pay-per-view buys 30%. Okay, keep that in mind. 30%. There must be something because it's a minor show where reporting of numbers is late because 4 days after the show, the number was 3,120. So that's what I reported last week, or that's what I told you guys last week. The final number for Bound for Glory was 6,900. So this would be the best television number for pay-per-view since the Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann match. So that's Rebellion 2021. And it's what the shows on Spike were doing at the end when they still had 1 million viewers each week. And then this is just the television number. One would think 8,000 for TV would be around 29,000 if you include streaming, based on the streaming versus television patterns today of other wrestling and boxing shows. Because TNA on television skews oldest of any wrestling show by a wide margin, the television to streaming ratio in theory would be a little bit less. But even so, I can see this as I can't see this as less than 24,000. So we're looking at them doing in between 24,000 and 30,000. Let's just say 24,000 and 30,000 for Hard to Kill, coming off of not having television for almost 3 months, that's pretty wild. And he goes on to talk about the competition that was happening on Saturday night. She said, which is a great figure for TNA over the last several years, and it's probably their third biggest since well before the end of the Spike days. That's not far off from what the promotion did, except for its biggest shows when it had all those big names. Not to mention, this show went head to head with not only the NFL, but Collision and also New Japan Battle in the Valley. Here's the thing that I don't think anybody's talking about. There, as far as I can tell, no one is reporting Battle in the Valley numbers because there's only streaming numbers. I bet this blew Battle in the Valley out of the water. Battle in the Valley had a larger attendance number, but I bet they kicked Battle in the Valley's ass on pay-per-view. I'd be curious to see if that number ever gets released because it's a streaming number. I think New Japan holds that close to the vest, but Hard to Kill was more widely available on streaming because not only were they on Fight or Trill or whatever it's called now, they were also on Premiere and they were also on TNA Plus, and I think you could buy it on YouTube as well. While Battle in the Valley was only available on Fight, so that's going to be. I think that's going to be interesting because Battle in the Valley had the Ospreay versus Okada, and they had Jon Moxley versus Shingo Takagi, and those are two big matches. And that's all. That's what the media was like. The media covered that more than they covered Hard to Kill, and I get it because their websites typically skew more New Japan versus TNA. But with this number, they might start paying more attention to TNA, and I think they should. So he said, but the curiosity over the TNA show was a big hit on pay-per-view, and Bound for Glory final numbers were also a big hit by modern standards for a show where the TV is only in a limited number of homes. Of the people who bought, okay, so he's just talking about the different people who bought what and where and all that stuff, which is I always skip that part because I just don't find that to be interesting. But yeah, Hard to Kill, major success. We're looking at, could be in and around $1 million revenue generated, because, $40 domestically. And I think in a lot of the different markets, it's only $20. So somebody can do the math, but that's revenue generated. That's not take home revenue because they do their splits and all that stuff. And, the pay-per-view companies get a cut of that. But even then we're talking like high six figures, for one show. That's really damn good. Now, not to mention, that show is going to get released on iMPACT Plus or TNA Plus. 30 days after, so they get to use it then. It's going to end up on Pluto, streaming a bunch of times, and they'll clip it for YouTube. So they're going to generate a lot of revenue just from that one show. For a small company with a limited number of weekly television viewers, that's pretty fucking good. So kudos to TNA. They deserve their flowers for how not only how good that Hard to Kill pay-per-view was, but how well it drew compared to what they normally draw, and how well it did on pay-per-view compared to what they normally do. Bound for Glory was up over the norm. So they were looking at over 20,000 buys for Bound for Glory as well. And then this one's in the high 20s and Bound for Glory was in the low 20s for two pay-per-views back to back like that. That's pretty damn good. Because I actually heard other podcasters assume that TNA only did like 5,000 pay-per-view buys. And I was like, you guys are out to lunch. You guys just aren't paying attention. You're not reading the TNA section of the Observer like I am. Because Dave's the only one that really gets these numbers and talks about it. So I think that we can just stop assuming that this company isn't a success as of right now, and stop comparing them to what they were in the Spike era, meaning like you can compare kind of what they're doing now, but don't say that when it's less than that it's a failure, because this is a different company with a different reach and things like that. Compare them to what they're doing, right now in the modern era. Modern era TNA is a pretty successful company compared to what they used to be. So, kudos to them. Congratulations to them, and I hope they have a ton more success. Just follow up to last week. Kylan King having knee surgery this week. She tore her ACL in December and will be out of action 8 months or longer. She got hurt on an indie show in Sanford, Florida on December 17th. So yeah, we're gonna be without her for a little while. So I hope she heals up nicely and comes back soon. We also got. Let's go to. I'm gonna do a share screen of this deal. So I think. So here's Jedi Goodman. So last Thursday, TNA Impact on Access was 112,000 with a 0.02 rating. That made it into the top 150. And this week, TNA's Impact was 102,000, and the demo stayed steady. And they were during their 3-month, essentially 3-month hiatus, their fourth quarter hiatus. They were doing sub 100,000, mid 100,000. I think they were getting like 65,000 for some. So some people are going to call these ratings good. But you know what? They were doing a lot better this time last year, I think. Or I know over the summer, like they had a lot of, like in the spring and summer, they actually had a lot of episodes that were in like, 120s and 130s and things like that. So I thought that they actually would be doing better right now with the hype around TNA. But here's the problem. They lost Verizon Fios, which is a good chunk of the amount of people that can actually watch it. So I think that's hurting, because I was assuming they'd be up into that one in between 120 and 140 range. And right now they're still kind of at the, eking by just over 100,000 viewers. Again, which is good for what they do. I just assumed it would be higher because of the hype around it, but losing that Verizon Fios does hurt them, and I hope they get that figured out, because while they increase their availability on Comcast, in certain markets on Xfinity, I think Miami and Nashville and Atlanta specifically, losing Verizon, which covers a lot of the Northeast, that's tough, because that is a large consumer base. So but yeah, ratings seem to be doing fine, based on what they do normally. So good for them. I just hope that they do a lot better going forward. But oh, hold on I need to hit a button here. Hold on just a second. This could be button worthy. I don't know why I even looked at Twitter. I was actually going to cancel or hit off of it, but check this out, guys in the chat. Check this out. You're in for a treat here.
Breaking news.
Now, look at this. This is Raj Giri on Twitter. Said, I'll give a hint regarding surprises for tonight for the Royal Rumble. The WWE TNA relationship is reaching new levels. And then he hashtags Royal Rumble. That's interesting. I wonder what that's all about. You know, my cousin Fed Pilled Joe, we both follow this guy on Twitter called Boozer, and he goes by BWE, but it's like Boozer. I can't remember what his actual Twitter tag is, but he only accepts people during like his account's a locked account. And he stated that there's a TNA legend and an ECW legend, kind of like teasing that. And then now Raj Giri is teasing it. I'm going to laugh my ass off if Tommy Dreamer shows up for the Royal Rumble. Because my first two thoughts when TNA legend, I was thinking it's probably going to be Mickey James. And then he said ECW legend. I was like, oh, it's going to be either Tommy Dreamer or Bully Ray. I assume that Mickey's in the Rumble, by the way. And because she's only ever missed one, and it was last year. I'm going to assume that she's in this Rumble because they love Mickey and, trot her out once a year. She works for OVW now where she's like an executive, but OVW is an independent promotion. So she can kind of go do whatever she wants. And I get the feeling she's going to be back in TNA eventually. So she's not under contract anywhere. So if it's Mickey James, that's not a sign of a TNA relationship with WWE. Now Tommy Dreamer is a contracted employee, like employee status. Not only is he a contracted wrestler, but he is under contract, like as an actual employee. So that's interesting. But they let Tommy do whatever he wants. So that's not that big of a deal either. Bully Ray does not actually work for TNA. So, and he wasn't brought back for Hard to Kill. And he wasn't brought back for the Orlando tapings. So unless it's somebody that's like actively under contract to TNA, I'm going to say this is a bit of a nothing burger, but it could be a big deal. So I'm actually going to be watching the Rumble tonight. I've never missed a Royal Rumble, and I thought about missing it tonight because of all the stuff going on in WWE, but I'm actually going to check it out. So I just like the Royal Rumble. I've always liked the Royal Rumble. So, and I'm not really a big fan of battle royals, but for some reason the way they do the Rumble, I just like it. I've always liked the Royal Rumble, so I think they do a good job with it, and I'm kind of at the point now where I'm looking forward to it. So, but yeah, not really a ton of other news to talk about with TNA. It was other than Mustafa Ali. That was really the big news, and of course the Hard to Kill news. I think that's just awesome for TNA. And then this week, that was it. TNA Explosion, it's returning. Like we knew that because we got some of the spoilers that they had been recording stuff as far back as the Vegas, the Snake Eyes tapings, but we had not seen it, but it's actually out. It's on TNA Plus every Friday, and then they're going to release it on their YouTube channel every Tuesday. So, yeah, Explosion is back. So, but it's going to be a lot of squash matches, nothing really of note. Which is what Explosion always was. I would like to see them do. Hold on, swig of coffee for the working man. For Explosion, I would like to see them do like 3 to 5 matches every week, kind of like what WCW used to do with their shoulder weekend programming, and feature some unknown talent mixed in with some of their homegrown talent, right? Like I think that would be cool. I wish they would just do record Explosion, once a month in the studio, and then every time they go to their big events, they like do a couple matches for Explosion there, and then just kind of mix it all together, hosted by Gia Miller. I think that would be cool. Like, how cool would it be just to see, like, because whenever somebody from AEW pops up and like that person was once in TNA, they always tweet out the clip. Like John Moxley had a dark match in TNA on Explosion. Like I think that's cool. Like before he was like anybody knew who he was. They had Seth Rollins, aka Tyler Black, did explosion matches. Like a lot of like big stars that you see today came through and did some explosion stuff. Like they would either do jobs or they'd actually have real matches. I would like to see like indie showcase type stuff on this explosion, right? Because what do you got to lose? And then like the main event every week could be, like two TNA contracted talents going at it. So have like a squash match or two, an indie showcase match, and then main event can be like Jake something versus Shira, right? Which I think was like on Explosion this week. I think that's why I thought that, but I think that would be cool. Or like the main event this week is like a 6-man tag, and it can be six different TNA contracted talents kind of going at it. No storyline, just having a fun match. Like that's what WCW like worldwide used to be, or I think actually they used to have a show called Main Event too, or Power Hour, or stuff like that. Like they could do stuff like that. So I bring back the Skyway Studios and do like once a month, bring in some indie talent, and then let your big name talent, do some of the bigger stuff at your TNA tapings. Make Explosion watchable. I would watch that show every week if they did stuff like that. But I think they're going to do just squash matches and shoulder segments like around the ring. They said they're bringing back, and then of course highlights of the Impact show. So that's what it is. But so we're going into the new TNA Impact episode 2, featuring the debut match of Nick Nemeth and the return of New Japan Pro Wrestling legend Kazuchika Okada, who at this point still does not have a contracted home. We're still waiting to hear where he's going to go. And then also we get Jordynne Grace versus Trinity in the rematch, which I think they undersold, to be honest with you. Which that's a little bit disappointing. They really did undersell that. But opening match is Chris Bay defeating Kevin Knight. I think Kevin Knight is here on excursion. I don't know that for a fact. But Uemura went back to Japan. Kevin Knight had done some matches previously in the company. The reason why I think this is because Kevin was at Hard to Kill instead of Battle in the Valley on the same night. He wasn't booked. He was just there. And he did the tapings the next night. Of course, he wrestled Chris Bay, and then he was also in Orlando. I think he's just going to be a regular going forward. I think New Japan has sent him to TNA for excursion. I hope they do something with him other than just beat him every week like they did Uemura. Uemura did get to have some good matches, and then he was in that tag team with Joe Hendry, which was a bit foolish. But I hope they just give Kevin Knight a run and make him like a serious contender to the X Division title. Not you don't have to make him the champion, but have him have competitive matches and give him some wins instead of what they did to Uemura, where it was like clearly, hey, this is a young boy and we can just beat him every week because he's just learning. Like Kevin Knight could actually, give you some great programming for your TV. He's going to be a big star one day. As soon as AEW figures out who he is and his contract comes up, they're going to sign him. Like that's just what's going to happen. They got no respect for New Japan contracts. They're just, they'll wait for it to be over and then they'll just sign them. That's what that New Japan, partnership's all about. Getting a good look at their talent so they can take them. So, but yeah, I thought this was a really good match. We'll go to the finish here. So Knight sent Bay into the corner with his gorgeous drop kick, probably one of the best drop kicks in pro wrestling. Before a floating Stinger splash landed perfectly, Knight double stomped the arm to avoid a backdrop and landed a brainbuster for 2. Bay avoided the frog splash and landed a corner Inzaghi before hitting a draping second rope elbow drop, art of finesse for the win. After the match was over, Grizzly Young veterans attacked Bay before taking out Ace Austin. Gibson and Drake took out Bay with Grit Your Teeth, and then the double team Codebreaker to Booze. So that's going to be the next. That's going to be the next feud, and it looks like they're doing a best of 3 series, probably culminating at No Surrender in February in a suburb of New Orleans. And then we get an Ash by Elegance cheesecake video aired to hype her eventual in-ring debut, which she actually did debut over the weekend at Orlando. I think she was on the Saturday night taping. So, excuse me. And then we get a recap of Kazarian turning on Eric Young, being a heel for the first time in many years. Kazarian said that he has nothing to explain right now, and he'll explain it next week. Swan interrupted him, and Kazarian tells him to join him because he's doing nothing. That is true. Um, and then AJ Francis appears, and AJ Francis told Swan that he'll be there for him when he faces Hendry. Francis asked where they met, and it was in the back row of a plane 5 years ago, and now he flies first class while Swan still flies in the back. Yeah, Swan's a former TNA champion. So, but yeah. I don't know that line was meant to hit the way that it's supposed to, but it looks like they're doing something with Swan and trying to get AJ Francis to turn Swan heel. I've been saying for a long time Swan needs to go heel. I think he has just been kind of a nothing underneath geek since he lost the title. And I know that he was ultimately like in that match with Omega, he gassed out and the company soured on him. Like, that's just my opinion. I don't know that for a fact. That's never been reported, but that's been my perception since that Omega match. They soured on him, and they've only given him a title shot once or twice since then, but they've never really gotten behind him since. And so I've been thinking, since he loses more than he wins, that eventually he should just turn heel. And I would have liked to see him be a part of the system with Moose and Edwards and Myers, but doesn't look like that's happening. But maybe he'll do something with AJ Francis. Okay, here's where the show just falls off a cliff. Dirty Dango and Oleg Prettius defeated Dante King and Darian Drake. This was kind of embarrassing. Like, there's nothing interesting about what Dango's doing. It's just not funny. It's not clever. It's not cool. It sucks. It's a waste of time. He just doesn't have it. They're literally just does not have it. And honestly, he takes away from the show more than he adds to it. So that's just, I don't know. It's just lame. Oh, hey, we got Nonzo in the chat. He said, explosion at the Rebel Entertainment. I'm thinking explosion at Nashville, the Skyway Studios, because Rebel Entertainment will cost them a lot more money, and you don't need that many people there for Skyway. I like to see them have kind of a residency for Explosion at Skyway, and then the main event be from their bigger shows that they're doing for the TNA tapings. But that's just me. That's just me fantasy booking somebody else's money. So I don't see them doing it. That's just kind of what I think they should do. But yeah, so basically, Oleg demolished everybody. Dango sat on the ring apron playing on his phone, and then he got in and got the victory. So then the Grizzly Young Veterans, they were in the back to complain about being put into a 4-way title match on day one, while Santino let them know that they were the best 2 out of 3 series will begin next week. And the GYVs and ABC for the tag titles. Backstage, Miller interviewed the Motor City Machine Guns and Kazuchika Okada and said they'll show everyone what total nonstop action is. And Okada actually said a line here. And so yeah, we're getting Okada in the main event, and then we go to Trinity and Jordynne Grace for the Knockouts title. And the Jordynne Grace match at Hard to Kill was Trinity's best match that I've ever seen her in. This was her second best match. I thought this was still very good. I think these two have chemistry. It's a shame that it's over. It's a shame that Naomi is probably going to be on the Royal Rumble tonight, but yeah, so a knockouts chant started the match off before Trinity worked as a heel, landing forearms during a handshake. Trinity landed a V-trigger and got starstruck on early before Grace got to the rope quickly. Grace escaped a corner charge with a massive forearm and got off a double A spine buster. Grace hopped up top but got kicked down before sending Trinity down and getting off a Vader bomb. Getting a 2 off a Vader bomb. There you go. We'll just go to the finish. They go back and forth on slaps before Trinity fell, and Grace yelled at her to get up and see if she wants it. And Trinity got a desperation full Nelson bomb for 2, but couldn't follow up with starstruck. Grace wanted a muscle buster, but Trinity got a 2 off a sunset flip off the top before a slew of 1-count cradles. This was kind of funny. They lead this seemed like it went on forever. The 1-count cradles, they were just kind of rolling back and forth like they were the 1960s. They led to a 2 count and then a cradle that Trinity turned into Starstruck, but then was turned into a pinfall win it for Grace. This is one of the better matches in either women's careers and the best knockouts title match on TV in many years. Yeah, this was Trinity's second best match ever, I think, and her first was the last match with Jordynne Grace. But yeah, now she's heading back to WWE where she's gonna have 4-minute matches on television. So but she's going to be much happier there. She can make a lot more money, and that's where her husband's at. So good for her. After the match, Giselle Shaw and the Shaw Taraj, which I hate that name, they beat up both women, and she V-triggered Trinity down and out. Then we go backstage. The System, they're standing by and said that they're the standard bearers in TNA. And Moose, as the TNA champion, proves that the system works. And then they go to Josh Alexander. Talking about living his dreams since he was 15, wrestling in a TNA ring and then wrestling the best in the world, Will Ospreay, and putting him down to become the world beater. Alan Angels then shows up. Alan Angels looks like he's Josh Alexander's baby brother, which if they do something like that, that actually, I think Alan Angels playing a dork could be funny because he is a bit of a dork. He looks like a douchebaggier version of Chris Daughtry. If you guys remember Chris Daughtry from American Idol years ago, he kind of looks like that too. And he's doing the whole rock star gimmick. I think that they think that he looks like Daughtry and that he's kind of like that's part of his gimmick, but he's like an annoying little nerd. And so, but Alan Angels let him know that he could be the first guest on his new show, The Sound Check. And Alexander, at first, he does not want anything to do with it, but Alan Angels tugs on his heartstrings and said, "Hey, didn't somebody give you a chance one day when you were starting out?" And then Alexander said yes. And we're talking to Alan Angels, who is, yes, an undercard geek, but put Kenny Omega to the test in AEW one day, and the internet went crazy thinking that they buried Kenny Omega. So that Alan Angels is who we're talking about. And then the announcers hyped up Nick Nemeth's first TNA match and being his first match outside of WWE ever. So this technically, yeah, absolutely, because he did do a match in Puerto Rico after this that already aired on TV, but he actually recorded this match first. So TNA did get his first match. They just didn't get to air it first because of the timing of it. And I think the way they did it was great. Let me go to YouTube real quick because Nick Nemeth's numbers on YouTube are insane right now. And let me so the segment where he returned at Hard to Kill did 1 million viewers, like has done over 1 million viewers. And his segment where he comes on to his promo that he did just last week is already up over 1 million viewers. So let me just go to TNA's YouTube. Let's see. So his actual match that he did with Zachary Wentz, this match, because they cut everything for YouTube, is at 188,000 views so far, and that's just a day later. And the Okada match is at 129,000 viewers. So that's pretty damn good. And then let me check out the stats on his. Let's see. Oh, 221,000 viewers for the Okada Ospreay versus Alexander match from last week. That's way up over what they normally do. So yeah, here let me share screen this deal. This is cool, man. Good for TNA. But yeah, look right there. Boom. Nick Nemeth addresses the world from January 18th. 1 million viewers. And then if you go to his, and I'll put the cursor over here, Nick Nemeth debuts in TNA Wrestling right here, 1.3 million viewers. I would say, a lot of us that undersold Nemeth coming to TNA, I think we're starting to find out why they thought this was such a big deal. He is proving to be a success here, and good for him and good for them. But his match here was it was a good match. It wasn't really anything anybody needs to go out of the way to see unless you're just really curious of what Nemeth looks like in a TNA ring. But I think they're saving him having a really, really good match for what he's going to do eventually whenever they get to that Macklin Nemeth match, because they're not having it at No Surrender because Nemeth is going to be in Japan wrestling David Finlay that weekend. So But let's see, Miguel came in and took a danger zone. That's the zigzag, by the way, before Macklin. Oh, sorry. Let's go to the finish here. So Wentz avoided a corner charge and got a schoolboy with the trunks for 2. Nemes leaping DDT got 2. Wentz got a slick handspring knee strike and a half Nelson slam for 2. A snapmare driver from Wentz was countered into the danger zone, aka the zigzag, for the win. After the match, Miguel came in and took a danger zone before a Macklin run-in took out Nemeth. He wanted a KIA, but ate a danger zone instead. So they're kind of making Macklin look like a geek here. 2 weeks in a row taking the danger zone. He's not getting any heat on him. He will eventually. I know he does at the Orlando tapings. And also, I mentioned that aforementioned match in Puerto Rico that Nemeth had. After that match, Macklin attacks him. So Macklin went to Puerto Rico with Nemeth instead of being at that Saturday night taping in Orlando. They were both in Puerto Rico and they shot an angle there. So I think that's kind of cool. So so then a Crazy Steve video airs saying that Tommy Dreamer held him back. He's going to use the digital media title to carve a scar into the history books of TNA wrestling. Rhino confronted him and wants the title. Okay. I don't know. That's lame. I don't want to see Rhino and Crazy Steve. And then a Decay video airs. So they're not in the undead realm, but they're doing craziness. I actually kind of dug the Decay video. If Decay is not going to be like magical zombies, I'm fine with that. If they're just 2 like crazy chicks, count me in. That's cool. And then we get MK Ultra defeating Danny Luna and Jody Threat. They're already beating Luna. So Threat comes in and lands a pump knee and a shotgun knees on the second rope for a 2 on Kelly. MK Ultra hits a slick double team short drop power bomb on Threat for the win. They need a name for that finisher. That was pretty cool. Nice little showcase. I thought the match was short, sweet. It was a good match. After the match, instead of a run-in, MK Ultra just beats up Danny Luna and hit the same double drop power bomb. And then we go to the main event. The Motor City Machine Guns and Kazuchika Okada defeat Moose, Myers, and Eddie Edwards. So the system's already losing, but they kind of had to because they have Okada in the match, and they got to try to get some heat back onto Alex Shelley after losing the title. So here's what I'll say about this. This was a good match. I thought the Motor City Machine Guns did great. Moose, Myers, and Eddie Edwards did awesome. And Okada did nothing. He was mainly like he came in for a series early on, and him and Moose faced off, and that was kind of fun. And then I think he ran in a couple of times after that, and then he just stood on the apron until the end, and he got knocked off the apron a couple of times and sold. And then he comes in the end and he hits a Rainmaker, and then Alex Shelley hits his move. Let's see here. We'll go to the end, but like they built up this Okada thing, and then Okada did basically nothing. So Okada landed the diving elbow before the Rainmaker pose, but Moose avoided the Rainmaker, but ate a drop kick, and then Moose responded in kind with a drop kick of his own. That Moose drop kick was tremendous, by the way, and I thought it actually looked better than the drop kick Okada landed earlier. And then Edwards avoids the shell shock, and the backpack stunner gets a 2. The system chant got muted because he said F the system before Moose ate a double super kick from the guns. Combo drop kick lands before Myers hits a jumping knee to Shelley. Roster cut misses on Okada, but the Rainmaker doesn't, and the shell shock wins it. The Faces close the show out with a hug, and Okada gets one last Rainmaker pose on US TV while in New Japan. And then they go off the air, and then the Mustafa Ali video hits. So that was the episode of TNA for this week, TNA Impact. I thought it was a good show. I liked the main event. The match of the night was Grace versus Trinity by far. Not that the main event wasn't really good. I thought the main event was really good, but it wasn't what the main event was the previous week. So we're going to close the show on this. Last week, I kind of did a whole segment, and we clipped it for YouTube, about Josh Alexander versus Will Ospreay, and whether or not that was the best TNA Impact match of all time, or the best TNA match of all time. Well, according to Dave Meltzer, it is, because he rated it in the Observer this week at 5.5 stars. There are some people that I know that won't give this thing more than 4 stars. And I think it's just because it was on TNA. They see the TNA logo, or before that the Impact logo, and then automatically you're going to give it like 25% less than what it deserves. And so they're gonna cut a star off of what it deserves. I said 5 stars because I think it's weird to go over 5. But Dave loved the match so much. He says so far it's the match of the year, beating everything on Wrestle Kingdom, beating everything on AEW television, and beating everything in Battle on the Valley. Said so far match of the year, and it's the greatest match in TNA history. It's going to be tough for TNA to keep up the momentum that they had in Vegas, carry that over into Orlando, because in Orlando, they don't have the stars. They just don't. Ali was not in Orlando at the taping, so he's not going to be on television for a month. They're probably just going to be doing these promos for the next month, waiting for him to debut at No Surrender. So that's going to be tough. The Orlando shows, I think we come back down to reality a little bit, and it's going to be very difficult to keep up the momentum. We already talked last week that Simon Gotch shows up and he's getting a push and he's going to feud with Josh Alexander. And then Big Khan's getting a push and he's out there, beating people up. And I think they're leading to a match with PCO that literally nobody wants to see. And there is another return, but I'm not going to spoil that one. I'm going to let you guys just enjoy that because I think that return is kind of cool. But again, it's not a big star. So, and they only get one match out of Nemeth, and so on that, because he did have to go to Puerto Rico for a previous engagement. And so, Orlando's going to be tough. We will see what it looks like on television. They did have a decent sized crowd for it. They usually do in Orlando. I don't think they sold that many tickets, but I think they were able to fill the building out. But a lot of the momentum that they had in Las Vegas is we're going to come back down to earth in Orlando, and it's going to be tough sledding from there. But hey, we ended the show this week on some very good news that Ali is coming in, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So, all right, guys. Well, hey, that's going to do it for me this week. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to Andre and Nonzo in the chat, and then everybody that kind of popped in for the Patreon subscribers. Thank you, Patreon subscribers. And if you're watching this on YouTube, give me that big thumbs up and drop down a comment. I'd greatly appreciate it. Alrighty, folks. I think that's going to do it for me this week. And until next time, mahalo.